All right, question of the day, or pregunta de la dia, I think. I'm working on my Spanish. But anyway, what is your favorite traveling game or game based on transportation? Now, there's a lot of them out there. In fact, one of the games that probably got many of us in the hobby was Ticket to Ride, a game all about traveling rails. We just did Rails to the West, and oh my gosh, what a great game. But what is your favorite game all about transportation and traveling? Because today we're taking a look at On the Underground. This is the London and Berlin maps. Now, this is a game all about putting track tiles out there on the board to build the London or Berlin Underground, and then having a tourist view the city. And hopefully he gets to take the Underground as opposed to walking, as we're wont to do. So let me know in the comments below your favorite touristy transportation game, and as we dive into the review right now. Hey, before you go any further, make sure to check out the Dice Tower merch store. We have the space shirt, and we are slinging. That has been our best seller of all time. Now, we're planning on using some of the art, more of the art from this year, in more merch and more ideas. So let me know what you have for comments. But go to the Dice Tower store right now and buy some great new 2024 Dice Tower space shirt right now. All right, this is On the Underground. Now, we're middle of play here because if I wasn't middle of play, it would look like a whole lot of nothing. Now, I want to switch one thing out just so we can see the difference. Let's put a yellow card in so that we can see what happens with a yellow card, because that does matter. B4, so this is B, 4 is down here, this is Putney, right here. Okay, so these are our stations that are active. Now, currently the Traveler, which you'll start over here at Euston, he's going to be traveling along the lines. Now, let me go ahead and get this rule set out of the way first, because this is actually the most difficult thing to comprehend. Now, this is the England-London side. The back is Berlin, and there are a couple different rules. London has no post-game scoring. Berlin has post-game scoring. And we'll get to how you score in just a moment. In fact, the reference card is a wordless reference card, which you know in my art direction side, that is going to get huge points because it's very easy to understand this. But let's just say here. So the Traveler is trying to get to these stations. So let's put Putney over that one. So he's going to move across the rails. Now, he's going to get to these stations no matter what, whichever one's closest, and he's going to use the least amount of walking spaces. By walking, I mean if there's not a rail line. So this would be a walking space. Now, what that means is if you had a longer route, let's just say that this was the place, and even though this one is here, this is 2 walking spaces. This has a train line all the way to it. He's going to go here instead of there because he wants to ride the rails or the Underground instead of going to walk. Call it laziness, call it convenience, sightseeing, whatever you want to call it. So just understand that at the end of each person's turn, they're going to make a move, the tourist. But if there's a yellow space, they will do the yellow first, and then they will go to a gray space. If there's only gray spaces, they're only going to make one move. If there's only yellow spaces, they're only going to make one move. The only time you do 2 is if there's a combination of yellow and gray. Now, these will change because as you move your turn, 2 cards will go away, at least 1, possibly 2. Meaning that the next turn, you're going to be building towards different stations. So ideally, you're going to try to get it to where you have a full line connecting to some of the active stations because they will go to that station. Now, there are certain rules about equidistance and things like that that you will have to read up on. It's very knacky, but it's a simple thing, but you got to think it through because you have to count this route and check and all that. Because why it matters is, depending on the route they use, each player in a 2-player game, for instance, will get multiple colors. That player has pink, red, orange, and yellow, whereas the other player has the gray, dark gray, blue, and green tracks. If the tourist uses a track of a player, they get a point for that. That's kind of how that works. Now, that's the movement phase. That is actually at the end of the turn, so let's go back to the beginning. You have 4 actions on your turn, which consist of laying a track. The first time you lay a track out there, it can go anywhere. Once you lay it, you have to build on either end of that track unless you have what's called branch tokens. You spend 2 of these and you can branch off the side, which is currently not happening in, right here, so green. This is branched. Instead of going straight, it branches off here. If you connect to one of these terminus stations, you get 2 points and a single branch token. If you connect to one of these national rails, you get a single point. If you connect 2 of these green tokens that match together, so 2 of the shopping carts, you're going to gain 3 points. If you make a loop around a certain set of stations, you're going to get points for each station inside of that loop, which gives you a lot of points. Now, You can lay those tracks or take the tokens, then you'll move the tourist. That's how you play the game. It's pretty much straightforward. Now on the back of the Berlin side, there's a couple in-game scoring things where you're going to try to collect things, but that's really it. I know that seems simple, but again, you have to play each turn looking at what cards are there to hopefully maximize your moments to get those points, because you want that tourist to use your rails to build your points each time. However, if there's multiple rails involved, so let's just say he's here. Now there are rails all the way across, so notice this. But now he's got to use yellow. Well, let's say there's a rail there too. He's got to use yellow, gray, red. So all three of the, or anybody who has those tracks as their collection will get points for that. So the game ends when all those cards run out. The person with the most points in the England side, London side, wins immediately. All right, that's it. So pretty straightforward game, right? The only tricky part is really trying to figure out which route is going to be taken. Now, that could cause arguments between you and your friends who say, well, it's actually this route. Well, no, it's actually this route. So you got to be really careful when you do that, count it up correctly. Now, again, as I've explained since January, now we use a rubric system that gives me kind of an idea of how the game breaks down in different categories. These would be concept, board layout, that would be kind of how the whole game looks on the table, mechanic, art direction, art, gameplay, art includes components, and rulebook. So first of all, concepts at 8.5. I like traveling. I've been on the London Underground. In fact, let me tell a quick aside. One night I was at the Magic Circle, invited by my good friend who is part of the Magic Circle, and went. It was great. We were having dinner, but we were cheap. We didn't pay for the extra cell phone services about 10 years ago. So I get on the Wi-Fi really quick at the restaurant. Actually, I didn't even have Wi-Fi. I just turned my phone on to check because my wife, niece, and daughter were going back to the hotel, and we had split up at the Tower of London. Well, turns out, all of a sudden I noticed, well, I don't have a message saying that Carla's back at the hotel. I was like, huh. So I checked to find my location. She had turned hers on, and she was nowhere near there. So I tell the guys, hey guys, I'm so sorry. I gave them some pounds, and I got up and I went out into London to try to find them. I made the same mistake. I went to the end of a line, terminus line, and I was like, well, what the heck? How do I get back? So I'm looking around London, and I go back towards the hotel where I think we are. And finally, I get off at a stop, and as I'm walking down the stairs, who do I see coming up the stairs but my wife, niece, and daughter? And it was just a miracle that I found them at that very moment being in the same spot, because they were going to keep going until they found where to go as well. So it can be hectic and crazy. So concepts at 8.5. I like the idea of traveling. I like the idea of building out the underground. Board layout. It looks good on the table. I actually like this kind of art. It reminds me of smartphone ink. It's got that very understated, but also lots of art kind of hidden in the board. So to me, it's actually a 9 for the layout, and it makes sense what to do. The mechanics. The mechanics are pretty simple. Take one of two actions, either lay a track or take a bridge tile or branch tile. So to me, that's pretty simple. It's a straightforward mechanic. The only thing that gets a little tricky is the actual tourist itself and trying to find which way that tourist goes. After that is art direction. Now this gets a 9 for me, and the reason it gets a 9 is because there are very few symbols in the game, and the symbols that are there make perfect sense, and there's a fantastic reference card that tells you everything you need to know. Art is an 8. The components are fine. You know, they're wooden little tokens. The tourist is actually nice, but he's kind of annoying because he doesn't really stand up really well. So it's an 8 for the art on the board and all that stuff and the components and everything. I do like that it has a grid, you know, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it makes it a lot easier to find those things on the board. Gameplay. I give this 6.5. Now, that's the lowest rating this game gets for me, is the 6.5 for the gameplay. Not because I don't like the gameplay. I just feel like it's a little too simplistic. But while it's simplistic and available to a lot of people, it's also difficult at times to figure out, okay, what's the best route, or what's the rule about walking again, or wait, does he take this route, or can I choose? And that whole little section about explaining when you choose which route versus just going is a little tricky, and obviously the person will take a very long way around if he can get there completely by underground. So you have to just kind of keep an eye on that. What I do like about the mechanics is the idea of playing each turn towards those cards, because you have to move the tourist at the end of your turn. Rulebook's a 9. It's actually a really great rule book. It has all the rules in there and has them broken down into parts on the same page. Some are highlighted in a certain color for London. Some are highlighted for Berlin. I really like that. So that's a very helpful thing. Here's the rules that apply to both. Here's the rules for this map. Here's the rules for this map. That's a really well done rule book. After everything is aggregated together, the overall score comes out to an 8.0. Now, there was some rounding down, actually 8.1 something down to 8.0, but much like we had the last game, which was 7.8 something. round up to an 8. So we round, so this gets an 8.0 on the underground. Fun intro level game, but also has some knacky issues of rinse and repeat a lot. And by the time you get about 3/4 of the way through that deck, you're like, whoo, we still got a few more cards to go. It is interesting though, because you obviously want to play those different tracks out, and I like that you get more than one track per person. To me, that's really cool because you have a chance. It almost feels like an 18xx game where you own multiple color branches and you get points if people use those. So I'm trying to lean over because I know my little insert's flying in here. It's probably covering half my face because I moved the camera by accident. But overall, 8.0 on the underground. That is me giving that a review. I'm Brian Drake here on the Dice Tower. Make sure to follow me on X and Instagram at Dice Tower Brian. Until next time, we'll see you.